Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I am, as always, Vadim Perlovsky. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we're excited to welcome back a brand we discovered, I think, last year, 2 years ago. One that a few of our members have fallen in love with, but they've had some great news over the last year or so. We're excited to welcome Ian Friedman, their new global national brand ambassador. Congratulations on the promotion. I heard your title changed this summer. So congratulations.
Thank
We're
you.
excited to welcome Penelope Bourbon. When we first tasted them, they were an independently owned, family-run company. Now they've been acquired and part of a bigger family. But you know what? I'm not going to step on your toes. I'll let Ian tell us all about that story. We're excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have 6 expressions in front of us, some of which may have the same name of something we tasted last time. But I know Ian and I chatted, and they develop and they're different, and the batch you have now is going to be different from the batch you had last time. So these are all new to us. So I'm excited to share these with you. For those of you keeping score and track at home, we're going to start with the 4 grain. That is going to be our introduction. So feel free to pour these up and put a lid on them and let them open up. But I'm going to toss these in the chat. We're going to do 4 grain, rosé cask, barrel strength, architect, and then we're going to do the toasted series with the bourbon and the rye. But I will let Ian introduce himself, introduce the brand, and please kick us right off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Veteran. And thank you, everyone, for joining. This is great. I know that some of you may have been part of the Penelope tasting a few years ago. How many people joined that tasting, just a show of hands? Or, uh, okay, some people. Good, good. Because I think it's important to understand a little bit of the brand history. So some of this may be repetitive for some folks, but it's important to know a little bit about the history of the brand and how it was formulated. Because it's amazing as being a brand ambassador for Luxco, I get to work with a whole host of different brands. Some of them are incredibly historic. We go back to the 1800s, and some of them, like Penelope, which is one of our most popular brands, 2018, but still a great story. So we run the gamut of old school bourbon brands all the way through to kind of the new school modern profile brands, which is a lot of fun. And as Vadim mentioned, I am the national brand ambassador for Luxco. I work a lot with Penelope, Yellowstone, Remus, Ezra Brooks, Rebel, Rossville Union, amongst other. Yes, the 4 grain is the 40% for from John. Just answering his question there. So the story of Penelope is one about friendship, childhood friendship. So Michael Palladini and Danny Polisi are the founders of the company. And these two gentlemen grew up together in New Jersey. So New Jersey is not exactly known as the center of bourbon, but that's where these guys formulated this company. There is a very old distiller in New Jersey, which people don't know about, Laird's. I don't know if you guys know of Laird's. They make apple brandy, American apple brandy. It was one of the oldest distillers in the country, is actually out of New Jersey. So there is a distilling tradition there. Maybe not where Mike and Danny are from, but just something I like to mention that's kind of fun. And so these two gentlemen stayed friends throughout their whole youth and into going to college and stayed friends after. Michael worked in entertainment initially out of college and then was in technology and media, was an entrepreneur and started a company called Bear Mattress, which was a competitor of like Purple Mattress and Casper, those direct-to-consumer mattress companies. I'm sure many of you have heard of Bear or a company like that. Just a very entrepreneurial guy, always out there trying to build companies, trying to launch companies, and just a really interesting businessman. Danny was also similar, except Danny's background is more scientific. He's a civil engineer and a restaurateur. So an entrepreneur, but also did civil engineering as well. So he's kind of the master blender. He's the one working behind the scenes and figuring out how to make the bourbon, whereas Michael is more of the kind of business-oriented business development guy. So they made a wonderful team. But back in the day, Michael and Danny were huge fans. Back in the day, we're talking 2016, 2017, were huge fans of bourbon. They love their Wild Turkey 101, their Basil Hayden. And one day, Michael was having a drink and thought to himself, "I want to start a bourbon company. How do I go about doing that?" And he literally went on the internet and looked up how to start a bourbon company. And he kept getting hits back with 3 letters that I'm sure many of you are familiar with: MGP, MGP, MGP. So many of you know MGP. And for those of you that are familiar with MGP but may not know like its full business, it has two main verticals. One of them is the food ingredients business. So they make like cornstarch, they make like textured proteins, and they have a whole team of food scientists that handle that part of their business. another huge part of their business is called distillery solutions. And essentially, what that means is if you're a well capitalized individual or someone looking to start a bourbon company, you can go to MGP and you can do a host of things with them. You can buy barrels. They can contract distill out of their distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which is one of the largest ones in the country. Um, you can have them distill and put in a barrel, and you can take the barrels. You can take the barrels and blend them in any way you want. And so they help to create a lot of your favorite brands, and a lot of the brands that I grew up drinking in the bourbon world had MGP in them, and I didn't even know it when I was drinking them. So some of the brands that many people drink on the bourbon shelf now, under NDA, you probably wouldn't even know that they actually have MGP juice in them. So it's a very ubiquitous. I mean, if you turned around the labels on maybe half of the bourbon bottles on the shelf, it would say distilled in Indiana on the back, right? About 75 to 78% of all domestic rye production comes from that distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, where Mike knew he had to go to kind of to try to source some barrels. So it's a very big distillery, and they have a very very large business in the distillery solution space. Over a $500 million a year is done in that business. So Mike knew going there was going to be what he had to do, and it was a mark of quality, and also there was some decent affordability in what you could buy from that distillery because they had so much stock. Now that being said, Michael didn't have a ton of money, and he didn't want MGP to know that, so he kind of presented himself as someone who maybe had a little bit more capital than he did at the time. But he called his buddy Danny and he said, "Do you want to come with me to Lawrenceburg, Indiana? I know that you said you'd be interested if I could figure this thing out about starting a whiskey brand. Why don't you come with me?" And so Danny went with him. So they went to MGP. They had a wonderful time. They tasted through a bunch of different mash bills. They liked three of the mash bills. One of them was a high corn mash bill. One of them was a rye mash bill. And one of them was a wheated mash bill. And those are the ones that they really liked. So at the end of the tour, um, the MGP representative said to them, "Okay, how many barrels do you want?" The guys kind of looked at each other and said, "We'll take six," kind of sheepishly. And the MGP kind of realized, okay, well, these guys kind of pulled the wool over our eyes. We're used to dealing with 6,000 barrels, 60,000 barrels, and these guys are buying six, but we'll sell them the six barrels. And eventually they were able to take those six barrels and figure out how to build a company off those six barrels. And they kept coming back to MGP and buying more and more and more barrels. So the company launches in around 2018. 5 years later, roughly a year ago, a little over a year ago, they were acquired by MGP for over $200 million. So these guys were able to take the company, build the company into what it is, and I think one of the most innovative and interesting companies in bourbon, and sell a portion of the company to MGP, the company that they were buying barrels from. So it's a really interesting story, and it's just a rocket ship of a company. And I think part of the reason why the company has done so well is because they don't come from the distillation or spirits industry at all. They're just fans, and they don't know what they can do or can't do. They just try it, and I think that's different for a lot of people who are established in the spirits industry. They have these rules in their head. Well, I can't do that, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. They kind of were doing a ton of trial and error. I mean, I don't know if Matt told this story last time, so forgive me if I'm repeating it, but even their first batch of four grain, which was a mixture of the three mash bills I was telling you about, a 99.1, a 45% wheat, and then a 21% rye. They blended that together, but they didn't even know how to bottle. They didn't know where to go. So they found a place on the East Coast called Distillers University, and they didn't have a lot of money to do anything with. So Mike said, "Well, why don't we just trade the students some mattresses, and they can bottle this four grain for us, and we can figure out how to get it to people and sell it." And so they made the trade. And one of the things about working with a university is that they're not professionals; they're students, right? So they gave them the proper blend, and when they got the first couple bottles back, they tasted on it, and it tasted horrible. And so they thought they did something wrong. They hadn't bottled before, so they weren't really certain. Maybe something changes during the bottling process. What did we do? And then that they found out that the students forgot to clean the lines prior to the first batch, and prior to that, they were bottling jalapeno liqueur. So the first couple batches of four grain, if you're on the East Coast and you go and search and find a dusty and old kind of ugly white label that looks like it was printed on out of Microsoft Word with a big kind of a shiny red P that's dusty, send us that bottle. We'll send you two back. You don't want to drink that one. It's not going to taste very good. But it
So
wasn't a
April
linear
1st
path.
tasting is going to have to include a bottle of that. I'm going to need to find that
I don't
out.
know. I bet you they have saved one, but I've never tried it. But Matt said he tried it and it was really bad. But that's one of these things is these guys just went out and took swings, and that included also the whole legal aspect of trying to get your product on the shelves through liquor boards and control states on the East Coast. And they just kind of figured it out as they went along, and they didn't know the rules. And I think that's why they've done so many innovative and interesting things. Another cool part about the company is they don't hire people who are necessarily from the spirits industry either. My boss, Matt Ward, who you guys had here last time a couple of years ago, he's from the hotels industry. He was like a logistics and opening hotels and kind of doing that. I come from the entertainment industry. Initially, I was a television and film producer for 20 years. So I am just an obsessed hobbyist that loved this brand and loved a lot of the Luxco brands and was fortunate enough to get this job and get to do this and share my knowledge and my passion with people like yourselves who are also very knowledgeable and passionate. So they come from the obsessed hobbyist side of things. And I think that's why the brand has done so well and touched consumers in such a way that, you go to some people's houses and there's just a line of peas on their liquor shelf because they just love the product. So we call that the billboard. So the first product you're going to try, I'll take my bottle out too. It's going to be this 4 grain. So I'm sure some of you have sipped on it. This was the flagship product. This is a blend of 3 different mash bills. It's 4 years old now. When you guys tried it last, it was probably 2 years ish, maybe a little bit older than that. So we're getting older, and we're getting older because we have better access to the barrels. So initially, when Danny was going into the warehouses, he was really having to find stuff that was uncharacteristically tasting much older than a 2 year or 2.5 or a 3 year to kind of blend in, to kind of to use his skill to make it seem like it was older juice and a little bit more refined on the palate. And part of it was making it a 4 grain, so it's a little bit sweeter and a little bit rounder. So adding that 75% corn, 15% wheat, about 7% rye, 3% malted barley is going to give it a much rounder, much sweeter mouthfeel. Also, the fact that it's non-chill filtered is helpful as well. Now, initially, we told everyone that it's non-chill filtered because, we're purists and we don't want to, take anything out of the whiskey, but we couldn't afford it because cold filtration is very, very expensive. And really, cold filtration, in my opinion, is more for people that are working at scale and need it to look uniform in the bottle. If you're going to pull a bottle from Canada or pull a bottle from Africa, you want it to look the same, and you want it to have a very consistent profile. For us, we were batching and it wasn't as important. Although it was something we were told we had to do, we ended up not doing it, and we stick with it. We don't chill filter. And the fact that we're still batching kind of helps have more of a, even at 80 proof 4 year old here, you're getting more of a viscous mouthfeel. It does have a nice mouthfeel. It doesn't feel thin like a lot of entry level whiskeys can feel. Part of that's the batching and the blending. Part of that's because we're not chill filtered. Um, so I get a lot of vanilla and caramel from this. I get a little bit of a citrusy pop, and then I do get some nice oak spice on the end from that 4 year old juice. So there's decent age in this. And I think that they were creating this to kind of be a whiskey for everyone. So for people like yourselves who really love whiskey and are used to drinking high proof, barrel strength whiskeys or really rare finished whiskeys, you'll drink this and you'll go, this is nice. This is easy to drink. It has a nice nose. There is something going on the palate. It's not dead on my palate. There is a beginning, middle, and end. And if you're someone who's new to whiskey and you try it, you'd say to yourself, okay, I think I might like bourbon. This isn't going to blow my palate up. It tastes sweet and I can blend it into things and it's going to be nice in a cocktail or on the rocks. So very versatile. And that was our approach. So on the back of this bottle, it says first steps. We are called Penelope. Penelope is Michael's firstborn daughter. So that is named after Michael's firstborn daughter. And when Penelope started walking was right around when the company started walking. So that's why on the back it says first step. So there's always little indications of that family company that Vadim was referring to, of a small company that grew into something much larger. All of the echoes of that are still involved in the brand. Even though we were purchased by a large company, Michael and Danny are still heavily involved, and those kind of signatures of the small brand are all still there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into some of the other expressions. So please enjoy this one. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this expression, especially if you've tried the one previously that was a little younger and now getting into the older juice, if you notice a difference or if you remember from your notes or anything like that.
Yeah, I like it a lot better than when we had it the last time. The younger, it was definitely much more grain forward. Definitely needed the age, and this is like, I think this is I'm tasting what they were trying to tell me it used to taste like. You know what I mean? Like, and it
Yeah.
didn't right there. And I like a lot of the other expressions. So I'm not knocking. I'm one of the guys who chases a lot of the bottles, but I don't have this, and I'm finally like, oh, okay. I got it. This is
Yeah. It's very approachable, and that was their goal. Yeah, it definitely has a longer finish to Jane's point. When you try some of the older expressions, there's not as much complexity on the back end for sure, but you're getting a little bit more of that now with the age on these blends. I get buttercream on this one too, and that's one of the there's a creaminess to it that I like. And I actually really enjoy the mouthfeel of this. It doesn't obviously if you're going to try our barrel strength and AB these back and forth, you're going to notice a difference. But if you're just opening with this, it's very pleasant. There is a nice mouthfeel to it. One thing I did want to ask of you, and if it's too late, don't worry about it right now, but maybe just save a little of each expression because the way that I've structured the tasting it'd be cool to kind of A/B some of these because we're working with very similar mash bills and then we're doing some finishes. So it'd be nice to go back and forth to kind of say, okay, what does this taste like at a lower proof with no finish versus a higher proof with a finish and so forth. So our first three expressions are going to be our 4 grain, and then we're going to move to our 3 grain for our architect and our toasted bourbon. So the first four expressions are actually, excuse me, three expressions are going to be your 4 grain. Yep. Yeah. Citrus. Absolutely. There is a citrus note in this for sure. Not unpleasant, not like a pine solly one in my opinion, but there's a zest to it for sure. All right. Tony went right in for it. All right. Good. I like that. All right, Michael, you love it. That's great. All right. So I'm gonna Vadim, it's cool for me to move on to the next expression, talk a little bit about that. I don't know how you want timing to be, but
That,
we can move right along. That's
yeah,
okay.
whatever comes naturally. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
cool. Great.
Let's go into it.
It's I'll do my little preamble here. So we're going to go to the rosé cast next, and one of the reasons why is because I like to go from very similar mash bill, right? So you're getting roughly the same mash bill that you just had. You're also getting a 4-year-old product, so same age, except you're getting a finish for roughly 4 months in a rosé cask. So you get to see what Danny does with a batch blend of something unfinished, and then you get to see sort of the innovation that we do when it comes to some of these very exotic and unique finishes. So the story behind this one's really interesting because Danny and Mike and their wives are massive wine fans. To this day, they love drinking their wine. Um, and I think it was Mike's wife initially said, "What if we were try to do a rosé cask finish?" And Mike and Danny were kind of blown away. We're like, "I don't think anyone in the bourbon industry is doing that. Let's try to figure that out." And one of the challenges with that is not all rosé wine is aged in a cask. Some of it is, and the ones that are, it's you have to source those barrels from France, and you have to source enough of those barrels to make it consistent. And all of those different wines have sometimes different blends of grapes, and they're from different regions. So if you're sourcing, different wines from different regions and rosé in different regions of France, you're going to get a very inconsistent finish. And that's what they were kind of experiencing initially. They were a little confused on how to do that. So they actually went to France and worked with a winemaker and purchased a wine line out of France, out of Rhone, that's 100% Grenache. So what they do was they bought this wine line, they import it to the United States, they sell it out of the Midwest under a label called Lila and Kennedy, which is Danny's twin daughters. This is also part of the Cooper series. You'll see on the bottom, if you ever see it on the shelf, it says Cooper series. A Cooper is someone who works with a barrel, but it's also Danny's son, too. So again, the family is integrated into this again. But they were able to get these casks. They dump it, they bottle it, they sell it under a completely different label, completely different company. And then they have wet rosé casks that they can then put the bourbon in. So this one you're getting higher proof. There's more bang in it, so it's 94 proof. But again, 4 years old, roughly the same mash bill with a finish on it. So if you were to AB that lower proof without a finish in this one, you'll see how strong a wet cask rosé finish is going to be on this. So it's a very surprising nose, very surprising mouthfeel, very creamy on the mouthfeel, very strawberry, very bright, very fruit forward. And you do taste that rosé on the finish, in my opinion. Some people get like a dryness to it, almost like the kind of dry oak finish that you would get from a nice balanced rosé. Um, Very subtle, very demure. Yes, you see me. I like your cat sitting on your lap. That's awesome. I can't let mine in or she'll raise hell. Um, so that's the story of the rosé cask. So this is an interesting one because some people drink it, like bourbon purists will drink it and they're like, I don't really know what to make of this. And then I'll pour this at a festival and there's people that are literally just like, this is all I want to drink. I'm just going to keep coming back here. I don't want to drink anything else. So it's so unique, an expression that some people just are drawn to it. Fred Minnick put this, I think, in his top 50 last year. He just really, really liked it. It's very unique. We are the only ones, I believe, in the bourbon industry doing a rosé cask finish, partially because of how difficult it is to work with those casks and the system that we've created to have the rosé. So very unique product, and it does very well for us. And I will say, I think a lot of people think, oh, this is, the ladies like this one. I was at the Rock and Rye Festival and up in Mammoth Lakes, and I was definitely pouring for a lot of ladies. And then these biker dudes came up, and I thought they want the barrel strength or the toasted rye, and they said, "Let me get some of that rosé," and they were drinking it all. They were drinking it all night. So everyone across the banner loves this product. Doesn't matter if you're someone who's used to drinking cask strength whiskey. Those biker dudes covered in neck tattoos and face tattoos were drinking that rosé, so they loved it. You
Yeah.
get the rosé cast from Holy. Yeah, I really notice. I don't know if it's necessarily a rosé cast, but on the nose, there's just something very different about the nose, and I get something very different on the nose, and then you're wondering, okay, does that kind of fruitiness and the kind of the bright sweetness follow through on the palate? And I get a very very similar thing on the palate. So you get the promise on the nose into the palate a little bit. Cherry and currant, sure. Yep, great must, absolutely. It's a very unique expression for sure. And again, it's nice to see, okay, we had an 80 proofer unfinished up to a 94 proofer with a finish. What is Danny doing to these products that makes it so different? How powerful is a finish and higher proof? You also notice a huge difference in the color in comparison to that. And that's just, I don't know how easy it is for you to see on Zoom, but much, much darker. And that's partially from the higher proof, but a lot from the rosé cast that is a wet cast that's in there for several months. So yeah, summertime drinker here in Florida for sure. So what does Danny call it? Danny calls it the porch pounder. You just sit on the porch and just crush it. So this one's also great in any sort of fruity cocktail too. So we have something called the Nelly, which is like a strawberry lemonade. Um, and I don't know, did I send you those cocktail cards? Was that in there, Vadim? It might have been. I'm not sure if I sent you those. If not, I can send some. There we go. Oh, there they are. Okay. Yeah, so you can put the 4 grain in there, or you can do the rosé cask. And the rosé cask in the strawberry lemonade gives it a little bit of a different flair than the 4 grain. So something to consider. But any kind of like fruity cocktail that you want, if that rosé cask can be a nice addition for sure. All right, so we're gonna stay in the 4 grain universe, and we're gonna go up the ladder here to our barrel strength. Okay, so our barrel strength is again the 4 grain with a bit more corn in it. It's roughly about 80% corn. There's still a decent amount of wheat in there with the rye and the malted barley, but we're going up with corn. Higher corn percentage at this higher proof is going to add a little bit more sweetness and kind of punch through the proof a little bit. So I think Danny kind of looks to add a little bit more corn in these higher proof barrel strength bourbons. So we have our 4 grain at our 80 proof. We have a finished product. Now we're going to go back to something that's from the barrel to the bottle, unfinished 4 grain bourbon. This one's going to be roughly about 5 years, in between 5 to 6 years old. There is older juice in it, but we'll call it roughly a 5-year-old. Um, and this one that you guys are trying, I believe, is batch number 17 at 116 proof. So a lot of people go, okay, 116 proof, that's pretty big proof. Even though y'all are bourbon drinkers, you're probably drinking hazmat stuff. 116 for the average person is going to be, that's big proof, right? Um, this out of the standard kind of core 4 or core 5 expressions is my favorite personally because I like a big drinking traditional sweet bourbon. And this kind of does the 5 or 6 things you want from that. So going back to their roots of being Wild Turkey 101 drinkers, I think this is sort of their homage to like what can we do at a high proof from the barrel to the bottle? Not that 101's a barrel proof, but a higher proof bourbon that's going to please the kind of bourbon heads and the aficionados, but also is going to be something that kind of shows Danny's prowess in blending, right? We're taking barrels that are uncharacteristically easy to drink at higher proofs and looking to blend those together to make a really smooth, easy drinking, high proof whiskey. So even though when you drink this, it's going to announce on the palate that it's a much bigger dram than what you just had with the rosé and what you had with the original 4 grain, it's not going to blow your palate out. You can drink this 2 or 3 times in a row, and it's not going to give you that thing where my tongue is numb and I can't taste anything, right? It's not like hazmatty or at 116. It feels nice and easy to drink with a lot of full flavor. You get a nice warm Indiana hug in the chest. Um, yeah, easy. It is. Yeah, it's a lot easier to drink, Jane. That's right. Even at 116, I think it drinks closer to like a bottled in bond or like a 105er, maybe even under that. So for me, this is one of the really unique products that we make because at these higher proofs, and again, these are batched, so you'll get anywhere from 112 up to 118. Some of the kind of special edition ones that you'll find can be higher than that. It just depends on what Danny finds and what he wants to include in these higher proof expressions. But um, I just really, really enjoy this one. And like I said, I think it does the 5 or 6 things you want a high proof bourbon to do without blowing your palate out. You got to be careful with this one because, if you're this far through the bottle after opening it, it's going to be a rough day tomorrow. You're going to feel like Vadim does today after his Michelin star dinner. So you don't want to do that.
I will say, I just double checked our photo. This is batch 19 that we're drinking. So
Batch
57.
19.
Yeah.
What proof is that?
It's
114?
57%. So 114.
114. Okay, yeah. So
That's
it's
why
going to
it's
be
drinking so much lighter than what you were saying. It's so much,
yeah,
so
it's
much lower than
two
116.
percentage points, right? I just pulled the 116. I mean, it's not going to be that much different at 114. Um, but yeah, so I get a lot of cinnamon in these later batches. A lot of baking spice, a lot of clove, some nice barrel in there, but very sweet. You get all that. I get some dark cocoa in there too. Barrel spice or barrel char is what I call it on the finish. I just really like these. I find they're really, really well balanced. And Danny usually does about 2 of these batches a year. So that's when you're drinking is the second batch. I thought I had sent Betty in the first batch, but I've got a bunch of bottles here, so I just pulled the wrong one. But the other cool thing about our brand, and this is probably something that Matt maybe explained the last time he did this, is that since we're batching and since we're doing a couple of years, sometimes you get the real crazy Penelope heads chasing different batches that they really liked, right? So Wendy, our Penelope or no whiskey ambassador, she'll talk about how there was a batch, I believe it was like batch 8 or 9 that tasted very red appley, and people really, really love that one. So sometimes people are trying to chase old bottles of that red apple batch 9. Some of them may be more cinnamon or baking spice, so people tend to chase those batches. So our last batch was a pretty high proof one at 116. So a lot of people really like that one. That could be the one they're looking for in the store, not the 114. Some people like the 114 better. So having that batching, we're creating this kind of weird, not even really scarcity, but just kind of interest in the brand, and we do that with a lot of our products. And we'll talk a little bit about the Architect, which has different. We call them builds, but essentially it's different batches of the Architect as well, which is what we do with a lot of our products. How are we feeling about the barrel strength? A lot of slow nods of content. I like that, Michael. Thank you.
I think I get it. I don't know. Other people taste differently, but on good MGP, I always get a really nice coconut note.
Okay.
Is what I
Yeah.
taste. I definitely get it here. It's just like it's what I if I know something MGP, if I get that coconut note, I'm like, okay, we're it's gonna age well in the bottle. We're gonna do well here. It's just like the note that I always get whenever I know.
Yeah, there's a signature, like some people pick it up as coconut, some people pick it up as a tropical thing,
Yeah,
right? It just depends on what's on your palate, but there is a signature to well-crafted, well-blended MGP
100%.
that like people just know, oh, that's MGP, and that's good MGP. That's
Yeah,
not young, it's well-crafted, someone took care and picked some good nice barrels, and now that we have the keys to the castle, Danny's picking the best stuff. He was trying to before, but it was just about what was available to us and what we could afford. But now, I mean, he's going into the racks and he comes out with that 1,000 yard stare and that clipboard, and who knows how many great barrels he's finding.
well, looking forward to hearing about the 16 year and the other new expressions later.
Yeah, sure.
Ian, I was I wanted to comment something about the rosé cask because when the Cooper series started coming out, I went all in. And my favorite is the Tokai cask,
Yeah. Yeah.
which we didn't have, and that was really good. But the first iteration, first series of the rosé cask wasn't. I wasn't thrilled with it.
Uh-huh.
Um, but this one was really nice. And the we've my nephew Ian, well, he's next to me. We've split bottles, and we belong to a restaurant that has a club, and Eureka, and they've done private barrel picks also, and we've done two of them, and it's always good. And this one's really, really good. I'm enjoying this. I mean, we've been a fan. And just to mention one thing, when you get to talking about the other expressions, I really want to hear about the Havana
Sure.
and when it's coming out, and if it's going to be as rare as the Rio is, because it's still hard to find. So
Yes, we'll talk. Well, after we go through all of our expressions, I can answer as questions as best I can on some of the other LTOs that we have coming out. Some of which I've not tried, so I can't comment on them. I just know a little bit of information about them. So as rare as they are, even as a brand ambassador, I'm begging the Kemper and my boss, "Can we get a bottle of that?" It's like not, we don't have any yet. It's in the works. So the other cool thing about the way that Danny works is his batching skills obviously have improved as he's learned to become a master blender and I think become one of the best in the industry. And their ability to, know exactly when to pull it out of the cask, maybe working with refill casks kind of helps the rosé. Maybe they're using it more than once. You don't really know exactly how he's doing it necessarily, and I don't think he needs to tell everyone how he's, you know, using his methodologies. But as we batch more and more, he's getting better and better and better and refining these processes more and more. And I think, that's a good segue into getting over to the architect too, because that is a different build each time, and that requires a lot of attention and a lot of engineering, if you will, which is what Danny's strong suit is. But I appreciate you saying that about the later batches of rosé, because that you're not alone in that. A lot of people tried it initially and thought it was interesting, but not necessarily something they'd go back to. But these newer expressions, people are really liking quite a bit. These are becoming some of their favorite pours on their shelf or at the bar. So appreciate
I
that.
mentioned it. I mentioned it in the comments, and the bourbon, the 4 grain. I've introduced people to it, and they're like, "How much is this?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, it's $35 a bottle. I mean, and it's readily available." And they're like, they can't believe it because they
Yeah.
think it's much it's more complex. It's just a great drinker.
It really is, yeah, and we appreciate you saying that because I think that's part of what the guys wanted to do initially was attack the marketplace with a product that punched way above its weight, and they did that. They were successful in doing that early on, but now that we have the keys to the castle, we can really do it because we're able to, a 4-year-old MGP at MGP is there's a lot of that. They have tens of thousands of barrels, so we are now a house brand, so Danny's able to really find the barrels he needs and wants and get those right lots and get the blends perfect and get everything the way he needs it. So I think it's just getting better and better and better. And so right now we're at 4 years old. I think it's a real sweet spot for this expression for the 4 grain for sure. Yeah, I was gonna say it's on offer. You can find it at $30, which is just, I think, a steal, a screaming deal. Some of the rosé casts too. I mean, Vadim was saying he was seeing it on sale for 40. So if you think about that, I mean, that's essentially a higher proof version of the 4 grain with a finish on it. So they're able to get it at a better price, even though it has that finish. It's not super aged juice, and the fact that we have
Vadim,
that those barrels is helpful.
yeah, Vadim put the link up that there's 3 bottles left at K&L, and I picked up one of those already. I mean, $37. I was like, okay, I'm willing to try it again at that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
great. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the architect. So what build do we have? Sorry, Vadim. Do we have build 10? Do you know?
Let me pull up the photo one more time. I
Yeah,
just closed it. Uh,
sorry about that.
we're looking at architect, right?
Yeah,
Architect. Would it be on the back?
yeah, it'd be on the back.
I don't have the bottle. That's a Jane
Oh,
question.
that's okay.
She probably knows. I don't know if she has the bottle in front of her. I have a photo of the front of the bottles
Oh,
for.
okay, cool.
Oh, they're
So
outside. It's fine, Jay. It's not a big deal.
yeah, the builds are the differences are nuanced in the staves, which I'll explain, but the actual core of the product is very similar, so it's not going to be that big of a deal whether it's 9 or 10. There's just differences in the profile and the flavor, but roughly. So this is an interesting one. We're moving away from our 4 grain universe and we're entering into our 3 grain universe, right? So this is a famous mash bill from MGP. This is our 75-21-4, 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. So we would call this a high rye mash bill, right? So we're moving away from that rounded sweetness of the 4 grain. You're going to get a little bit more of that spice of the rye in this. However, even at a 4-year-old product, this is at 104 proof, and we're finishing it with very unique French oak staves from Tonnery Rideau, which is one of the largest barrel makers in France for the spirits and wine industry there. And the way that we treated this was we wanted to create a bourbon that had characteristics reminiscent of a red wine. I remember I mentioned these guys love their red wine. And so they wanted to create a bourbon that had that unique characteristic of a complex red wine. And so they thought to themselves, like drinking a bourbon inside of a winery, what would that embody? Like, what's the feeling that would give you? And so they thought about how they would do the finishing of this. And the reason why it's called Architect, again, a little bit is partially because it requires a lot of engineering. But the other part is my boss, Matt Ward, who was here last time, he may have told you this story. It's actually named after his dad because Matt helped Danny work on this project and work on this product. And so they wanted to honor Matt's dad, who is an architect. And so that's why this one is called Architect. So it's again, dual meaning, much like the Cooper series, the Architect is named after someone, but really they are building this product. And so the way that they build it is we get these French oak staves in batches from Tonnery Rideau, and we get them in very different stages. So we have a categorization system in the United States of charring and toasting our barrels. So we have chars 1 through 5. We have toasts, light, medium, heavy. In France, they have, obviously it's France, so it's fancy. They have, complex, intense, delicate, right? They're using much fancier system to do it. And all of those different styles of working with the staves. Again, we're not taking the barrels, we're just taking the pieces of the staves in various different char levels and toast levels and getting those bundled and then getting a readout of what that wood, what the characteristics of that wood may impart in the whiskey. So tannin levels, quality of the wood grain, the char on it. And that's going to give us an indication as to how those staves are going to interact with our blended barrels of the 75, 21, and 4 that we put into a large vat. Now, we just don't take those staves and throw them in the vat and just let them steep and hope it works. We actually take small cross sections and put them in the top. There's actually videos on Danny's Instagram. You can see him working with the staves. He's actually taking them, cutting them, sawing them with a little sawzall thing and putting them in the top and letting them sit in there and hyper aging it and then tasting on that. And that's what he chooses. The collection of those staves is what he chooses to then expand outward into the larger scale and put that into the 10,000 gallon vat, right? We don't want to ruin it. We want to make sure it works first in these smaller bottles. And then when we get the cross section that we like, those are the batches of the staves that we put into the blend and let it sit in there for about 6 to 8 weeks roughly. And so that's what it imparts this. You're going to get the very traditional 75-21 for mash bill flavor profile, but then you're also going to get some caramel and some oak, and then a nice drying kind of sensation on the back of your tongue, almost like you're drinking a Cabernet Sauvignon or a nice red wine. A lot of people who are single malt drinkers tend to really like this because it has a deep richness. It's complicated. I call the barrel strength is the non-thinking person's bourbon, right? It has some layers and complexity. This is the thinking person's bourbon, right? This is the one where you get out your pipe and your smoking jacket and you sit in your study with your leather-bound books and your hunting dogs at your feet and try to figure out what the hell's going on in each sip, right? Everything's going to give you something different. So a lot of layers, a lot of complexity, a very velvety kind of elegant mouthfeel. And I just think this is a really, really unique product. And I think when it comes to French oak stave or French oak finishes, one of the finest ones in the industry. On the back of every single, you can see that kind of on the back of every single architect, you can see the build number at the top, and then it shows you this sort of heat map. And what that is in the middle of the heat map is going to be the control, and that's the actual whiskey itself. And the outer edge is going to be the oak staves, and it's going to be all different like fruit on the nose, oak perception on the nose, vanilla, spicy, and all these builds are going to have a different orientation based on how the staves interact. So build 10 could be pushed over this way where there's more fruitiness or more toasted flavors, and another build can be different, right? So that's one of the cool things. Again, as I was mentioning, as we batch our whiskey, these builds are all very unique and very different. So some people are chasing some of the earlier builds that they liked. Some of the earlier builds were actually a 4 grain, but it was a little bit difficult to work with that 4 grain. Danny may go back to the 4 grain, but right now we're in the 3 grain universe with this one. So again, 104 years, 104 proof, 4-year old with the French oak stave finish. And again, try to just save a little bit of this one if you can, because we're going to go to another one in a minute or two here. That's this, it's similar, same mash bill, but a very different product. How are we enjoying the architect?
Very interesting. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I'm enjoying it more now that I know more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you know how intricate the process is, it makes you appreciate it more. For some people, who are into more traditional profile, there's like a lot going on in this. It's someone who, for me, I came from the single malt world, so I obviously have always loved bourbon. I'm a huge fan of bourbon. I'd say bourbon's my go-to now, but I was a big single malt freak for a while. So for me, when I drink this one, it's very reminiscent of like a Highland single malt or something very complicated, a little spicy. Um, so it always kind of brings me back to my hardcore single malt days.
Well, Vadim hates them all. It's weird. This has made me fall in love with Penelope. The architect it was like 2 years ago, and I was just like, it was also around the time that I discovered how much I love French oak. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, what is Maker's 46 and Penelope and Mixer's Toasted? Well, oh shit, it's all French oak. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, I guess that's my palate. But there's something about the wood influence that comes through to balance it. So
Hmm.
it's not overly sweet. It's got a tannic thing. It reminds me. I like a wood influence that makes me feel like I just ate a walnut or a praline. Kind of makes me
Yeah. Yeah.
lick my tongue, and and I get it, and I dig it a lot.
Yeah. That gives you like kind of tree nut kind of oakiness. Uh, Definitely. Yeah, that astringency
Never,
that you feel, Jane, is going to be that kind of drying sensation on that you get from, a nice dry red wine.
I've never associated wood tannins with nuttiness until Jordan literally just said it out loud. And
Yeah,
as
it
I
makes
had this on
sense
my
though.
tongue, I was like, oh, this tastes a little nutty, like a walnut.
Yeah.
Like not an almond or a hazel, but like walnutty. And he literally read my mind as he was talking about it, and then made that final fire connection between brain and tongue of like, oh, that's the French oak. That
Yeah,
make okay, now I know.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's really cool. Thank you. You can always trust Jordan to
You're
be a
welcome.
better speaker than I. Architect always seemed like the least fancy of your labels. Interestingly enough, like all the other ones have all these like beautiful etched roses on them, and this one is just here's Times New Roman
Yeah.
on a blue sticker.
I don't know this for a fact, but I have a feeling that and again, I'm just speculating, but like the marketing people are probably when, after we were acquired, we're probably like, why don't we just take all of the bottles and make them like the 4 grain should just look like all the other ones, and it should be a white label on the bottom saying this would just be a blue label. But I think that it's just the tradition of coming at it like really differently, right? These two products have very unique labels. Like that's just how they are. And all the other products now are uniform except for the white label and and this architect. So even now the 9-year private select that used to be a black label like this
Mhm.
is actually part of the estate collection, and it has the small black label on the bottom. So they're trying to move them all towards it, but I have a feeling that they're going to stick with this blue label and the white label for the four grain. These are the two kind of holdovers from the old marketing. And then if you look at kind of the newer products, you have the lower band on it with the Penelope bourbon kind of and the peonies on it. So it's kind of an interesting branding thing, but it works. And I think it was like, again, these they were learning as they went, but it just worked, right? I don't think a marketing professor would tell you, yeah, make all the bottles look completely different, right? You'd want it to all look very uniform. But I think that big P just kind of people get it. Okay, well, it's part of the same brand, even though the white label looks considerably different. So
For sure.
Was
The architect totally looks like it was designed by an engineer. It's very like
yes,
straight,
yeah,
very
utilitarian, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, it's supposed to
yeah.
look like architectural drawings, blueprints, right? I mean, that's what I feel.
Yeah, like if you look really, really close, you can see like there's actual like design on the label that's very faint, that's like kind of circular, concentric, almost like blueprinty kind of things in the background. And so that was part of the motif. So let's move on to our toasted bourbon here. So this is, I really like to A/B the architect in this one because it's the same mash bill. This particular version of the toasted is the same age. So we have about two of these toasteds that come out a year. The one that was out in California maybe 6 months ago was actually a 5 year. This one's a 4 year. It had a different, this one has a char five and a heavy toast. So very, very secondary barrely, right? So you're going to get a lot of those kind of heavy marshmallowy caramel barrel char characteristics from that secondary barrel finish. Again, same mash bill as the last one you just had, the Architect, but it tastes and smells completely different. It's roughly the same proof. It's 100 proof, whereas the Architect is 104. And this one in the secondary finish is going to be dumped from its primary aging and then rebarreled in a char 5 heavy toasted fresh barrel that's made bespoke for us. So you're getting all of that secondary barrel influence, and Danny leaves it in the barrel for varying degrees of time. It could be 6 months, could be 9 months, just depends on how long he feels when it's ready. And then pulls it out. So I get an incredible, I call this the s'mores in a glass. It's caramelly, it's burnt marshmallow. It's just, if you like the toasted profile, I mean, people really, really enjoy our toasted products, and this one definitely has all of the things that you want in a toasted bourbon. The one that we had prior, I actually was my favorite of the toasted bourbons because it was a slightly less. It was, I think it was a char two heavy toast, and so for me it was a little bit lighter on that kind of burnt marshmallow, and I really enjoyed that. But this people really, really like this one too. I pour a lot of this when I go and do tastings or do festivals. There's always very little left in the toasted bottle. So I would venture to say that we would call this a modern profile or a very modern product, right? The toasted products are just all over the place now, and I think Penelope does a really, really good job with their toasted products. Cola, yeah, that cola or cola nut you might be getting from that burnt char, that kind of barrel influence, that woodiness, oakiness. I always tell people if you've had a nice big dinner and you don't want to have a big heavy piece of cake or some um you know uh you don't want to be too heavy, this is a great after dinner dessert kind of deal. You can have an ounce and a half of this and feel like you had dessert and not feel like it's too heavy or anything like that. Um yeah, but to A/B the architect in this one is really interesting because you see the differences in what finishing can do to the same, pretty much the same exact distillate, roughly.
Guys, don't be shy. I'm the only one hurting today. Y'all should be. Feel free to
I
unmute.
don't mind sitting in the awkward silence. I'm just looking at everyone's reactions. I like seeing what people think. I saw Michael just downed it. I don't know if that was the same one.
I know he's got like several bottles in the background that he's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
pouring more from. He's
He
a big
went for it.
Penelope
I
fan.
like that. I like when people just go, yeah, I like that. Boom, done. There you go. People always ask me when I pour, can I like knock it back? I'm like, hey, when it's in your glass, you do whatever you want with it. I'm not one of these. I'm not a stickler when it comes to the water after. Oh, okay, okay. It looked like it had a color to it. I'm like, okay, he's getting after it. I like that.
Those Andersons, they know how to party.
Yeah.
I like this bottle a lot, and I really liked it until I got the toasted rye, and then I was like, man, it's not as good. No offense, the rye is fucking
Oh, you
legit.
went for the toasted rye, or you've already tried the toasted rye?
I may or may not have a lot of bottles in my collection of
Okay, 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 yeah,
I
yeah. I'll give you my spiel on the toasted rye in a minute, but yeah, I agree with you. I do the toasted rye is just.
it's
I'll tell a little story about that from the last week or so. That was a really interesting thing, a little anecdotal story on that. That's pretty fun. So General, I just want to, anyone else want to comment on how they feel about the toasted bourbon? Like I said, it's one that people really seem to like, and I've enjoyed a lot of the expressions. I like that kind of burnt marshmallow thing that got going on there, and I think they do a good job with the secondary finish. I think Danny does a really nice job with the blend and the finish.
It feels like this one's sweeter than the others, more mellow,
Yes.
sweet.
Yeah, I found this one to be a lit like I said, the one previously was more to my liking. I do like this one quite a bit. Every once in a while you'll find some of the barrel picks of this, or they have like regional, like if you go up to Wisconsin, they have the marshmallow toast. I don't know if you've seen those ones, but those are going to be heavy toast, heavy char, higher proof. So if you think this one's sweet, go to the 110 proof version that's probably a little bit older with that heavy char, heavy toast, and it's really sweet and really, really big on the palate and kind of built to be a much bigger explosive flavor. And that's almost like a different product if you ask me. Like if you were to try this one next to the toasted marshmallow, it almost is like there's not as much similarity because of that higher proof and potentially more age on the finish and everything. So Danny does a lot of interesting stuff with this toasted product. So very cool. All right. So we're moving on to the finale. And I personally will just say that this is one of my favorite LTO products that we've released in a long time. And um, there's a lot of story behind this one. So the one that came out last year was a 5-year-old 100% rye, right? So this one is going to be a 6-year-old 95.5 rye at 100 proof. Last year's was 100 proof as well. So very interesting flavor profile on the one last year. For me, last year's was a mint bomb. So if you're a rye lover and you like that mintiness, last year had a ton of that mintiness, and I did enjoy that. But then it also had a nice caramel note from that secondary toasted barrel finish. This one is what I would call the inverted rye or a gateway rye. So I've poured this for I don't know how many people that say I don't like rye. I was at a bourbon festival in Oklahoma last week. There was none of this left by the end of it. Everyone loved it. And part of the reason why is because people that don't like rye, I pour it for them and they're like, "Ooh, I actually really do like that. Maybe I do like rye," right? It's kind of like our 4 grain. I don't like bourbon. Well, maybe I do like bourbon. And I think this does the same thing. And I call it the inverted rye because normally, as many of you know, when you drink an unfinished rye with a decent proof on it, it's very top note, right? You get all the flavor at the top. You get a lot of explosive perfumey notes. You get a fruitiness to it, like potpourri. You get some pepper. You get that sweetness, and that kind of follows through on the mid palate into the finish. And it's a very big drinking, rye. Especially younger ryes can be very big drinking, very top of the palate. This is an older rye with a secondary finish, so I think it mutes down the top notes of that rye and delivers kind of a very mellow entry kind of point. It's got a very nice caramelly nose. You do get a little bit of rye on the nose, but it kind of mellows out the front end, and then you get the rye delivered on the mid and the back of the palate with that beautiful caramel marshmallowy kind of sweetness from the toasted barrel. So this is a Char 2 heavy toast, 100 proof 6-year-old product. So this has some decent age on it. Um, And I just absolutely love this product. When I first opened my first bottle, I drank half the bottle. And I normally for rye, I love rye, but I'll pour, like a Rossville Union barrel proof. I'll have one glass, maybe two glasses, and I'm good because it's just big. It's a big flavor. This one to me is really, really unique in what the secondary toast can do. So a lot of times when I'm doing tastings, I will bring like a special bottle of like Rossville 7-year old or something similar so people can try the 95.5 mash bill, which is a very famous mash bill at around the same proof, around the same age. So you can taste the unfinished versus tasting this one, which Danny gets his hands on. And part of the reason why Danny always finishes his rye, Michael, you were mentioning that you love the Tokai, which is also a 95.5, slightly older, an 8-year-old product. But Danny actually doesn't like rye. He likes finished rye, so he finishes all of his ryes. So I think you'd be very hard pressed to see Penelope release an unfinished rye. All of our rye is going to have some kind of unique finish, and this one is a pretty nice, unique toasted rye. Um, Last week I was in Oklahoma and I did it in an event at a place called ZT Cigars, which is a relatively well-known cigar lounge in Oklahoma City. And there's a guy. How many people have heard of a guy named Dwayne Poor? You heard of him? So if you go on YouTube, watch his videos on YouTube. People go and visit with him in Oklahoma City. He has one of the largest whiskey collections in North America. He has about an $8 or $10 million whiskey collection. So I've seen his videos. He's a huge single malt guy, and as I mentioned, I love single malt as well. So I'd followed his videos online. People had gone and interviewed him, and he's from Oklahoma City. But I never thought of anything about it because I was visiting Oklahoma City. I never thought I'd meet Dwayne Poor. But Dwayne Poor, I'm sitting there talking to the RNDC representative who set up the event, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Dwayne Port. And Dwayne is, really like kind of a bigger than life personality. And he says, "I want to try the Rio." We had a bottle of Rio at the time that the RNDC rep had helped us with. And so, I started tasting him on some of the expressions of Penelope, and he's a single malt guy. So he said, he's like, "I like bourbon, but I'm really a single malt guy." So he tried the Rio and he said, "That's kind of too sweet for me." He tried some of our other products, and then he tried this, the toasted rye. And he tried that and he looked at me and he said, "That's really good." And this is a guy who drinks, $50,000 bottles of whiskey. So for me, I felt very good knowing that this is one of my favorite products. And Dwayne Poor, who's got a very discerning palate, really, really loved this one too. I thought, oh, okay, I think we're on the right track with this as a company. I think Danny really knows what he's doing. Not that I doubted it for a second, but so Dwayne Poor, one of Dwayne Poor's favorite pours is this toasted rye that he tried last week. So just know that that a huge whiskey aficionado love this one too. So if you like it, you're in good company. If you don't like it, to each their own. But personally, I think this is one of the better products we've released in a while, and a little bit of a sleeper. The cool thing about our toasted ryes is that they come out once a year, and then when they're gone, they're gone. So if you see one of last year's, I would go ahead and buy that one because there's not a lot of it around. I think all of California, Vadim, maybe got 60 cases of it last year, and that's going to look a lot like it's going to look a lot like that label, but it's going to be a rye. This year we made it green, so it's kind of discernible. But when you see them, if you like them, buy them because next year it'll be a different product. Danny may make it older. He may do a different style finish. We don't know. But if you like this one, buy a couple bottles if you can find them. There's still some around in California, but it only comes out for a couple months at the end of the year. And then when it cycles through its inventory, it's gone until it comes out to a new version comes out towards the end of next year. So that's how we do our toasteds.
This one seems to be Asti approved, so I don't know who that other guy is, but as long as she likes it, I'm in.
Good.
I did forget, Jordan reminded me, I want to invite everyone to turn on their camera for just a second, get James and Cesar and Luis back on here, take our photo, and invite everyone to do our little poll, because I'm sure Ian wants to know,
Yeah.
what is your favorite pour of the night? Let's launch that. Let us know. Hey,
I'm voting.
James.
I'm voting on mine.
All right, good. The florality on this is so good. How old did you say this rye was? It's
6 years
very
old.
floral and
6 years old. So, when MGP rye gets to that 6 and up age range, and I've had some really old ones. I've been really fortunate. Ian Steersman, the master distiller, has poured me some old ones that when I went and visited the distillery, it takes on a very floral quality, like almost like a cognac or an Armagnac. It gets these really kind of rich, fruity, floral notes that I think are very unique to especially the 95.5. Some of the other mash bills have it too, but for me, that 95.5 is what takes those on. So I think that you're right with that, Vadim, that it does get a floral quality to it, in my opinion, too.
So you said this is around 6, yeah?
6 year old, yeah. With the secondary finish that,
For
you
sure.
don't count that age, but that it does matter, right?
For sure. So yeah, so I'm glad to see a lot of our familiar faces on the Zoom. Raise a glass and say cheers and smile to the camera. Got it. Please vote in the poll. And yeah, Ian, thank you so much for sharing the liquid and the story with us. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's nice to reconnect and learn about the brand and see where you guys are headed. Clearly, being acquired by MGP hasn't made any negative effects on the brand, you know? Everyone's always afraid of a brand they fall in love with being acquired by the big guys, and then they lose their ethos. And clearly that hasn't been the case with you guys. So well done.
No, and to Luxco's credit, and this is something that I've seen, as I came into the company, my relationship is, and the way that I came into the company was I was someone who was working as an independent contractor, mainly with Penelope, and then through the acquisition started working with Luxco more. And one of the cool things about Luxco is that Luxco looked at what Penelope was doing. And I've been the part of large companies that acquire smaller companies, and they don't look at what those companies are doing. They just try to integrate them into their system. But one of the things that Luxco did that I noticed immediately when I joined the company more formally, but even when I was working as an independent contractor, is they were looking at the systems and the way in which Penelope created their brand and trying to gain hints and insight into how they can incorporate that into some of their other house brands. And especially their tasting, the kind of system that Matt Ward and Matt Ward's team at Penelope had built with their in-store tasting program. So we do thousands of tastings a year at retailers all across the country. And that was something that we did with Penelope that was really, really important for us. And I think helped grow the brand almost like a guerrilla marketing campaign. It's like if you're in the store and you're passionate about it. So they were hiring people who are fans of Penelope to go into stores and sample Penelope with people. And so if you're passionate about the brand and you love it, you're going to be like, try this. How good is it? You know? And so that's how they were able to build Penelope into the brand and the sensation it was. And Luxco has adopted that with some of their other brands. So we're doing that with Yellowstone and Rebel and Ezra and El Mayor Tequila. And we're seeing the effects of that. When you go into a store and you do a tasting, there's something called a pull rate. A certain amount of bottles always are sold when you go and do these tastings. And so Penelope realized that early on, and Luxco has adopted that. So that's one of the really cool things about Luxco MGP is they didn't look at Penelope and go, let's just smash them into our systems. They're like, no, what are these guys doing? How did they do this? How can we do something similar? And they've been integrating a lot of these systems into their own company, which is very, very unique and rare. So, like I mentioned, I was part of acquisitions at a large company when I was in entertainment, and I was part of a company that was acquired. And once we were acquired, I mean, that was it. Like the company just was like, this is how you're doing your expenses now. This is how you're doing this now. And then eventually the company just kind of became this sort of blob that didn't really do much in the other company and just became part of the company. So they're actually looking at it in a holistic way. Warren, Ohio. They have one of the best whiskey and cigar selections. Oh, okay, cool. Wendy Pavich, who is our Penelope specific whiskey ambassador, she's in Ohio. She probably knows that place, but I'm sure she would love to do um a tasting there, Ian, for sure. Well, I'll let her know. I'll write that down right now. She probably has done some stuff there. Great chili dog. Okay, good to know. I have a feeling you're not going to feel too great the next day if you're doing a bunch of cigars, a bunch of whiskey, and finish the night off with some chili dogs. It's not going to be quite the Michelin star meal that Vadim had.
It sounds like a night in New Orleans, actually. The lucky dogs all on the street corner.
Oh yeah, the kind of street meat ones. I've had
Yeah,
those, unfortunately. Yeah, I've been in a state where I needed one, and I didn't feel good the next day. That's for sure.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that those are sanctioned by the city, if you know what I mean. I think it's
What could go wrong? Just drink
yeah,
more alcohol.
right.
It'll take away the the microbes.
Yeah.
Just about everyone has voted. I'm going to close down the poll. Ian, what do you think was the favorite of the night with this group?
I'm gonna say,
Yes,
I'm gonna make a guess. Toasted rye,
you're close. The results are in.
toasted bourbon. Okay. All right.
Yeah, toasted bourbon took it,
All
but it's pretty
right.
close. I mean, you're all over the board. Usually there's one runaway, and this one is pretty close all around. So
Yeah, I mean, look at the how many of them are 18 percenters. That's interesting.
yeah, that's great.
Very
That means
cool.
you're making
I
good
know
whiskey all around. A
I know
different
pe
bottle for a different consumer.
I know people love that the toasted's just the toasted series that would people just love the toasted stuff. It's just that modern profile is really popular. And it does really, really well for us. So you just did that kind of Zoom poll. When I do like a festival or if I'm pouring in an event, I just look at how much is left in each bottle, and that's my that's how much. And usually it's the toasted rye and the toasted bourbon, and then some mixture of the other ones that are kind of kind of mixed, a blend. But sometimes it'll be weird, like all of a sudden I'll just have an outlier, like barrel strength for some reason at one event will just do really well. People will just really like that one. So, but usually the toasted products are what do the best for us. And that rosé cask can be an outsider too. Sometimes people just get obsessed with that one. But it is cool. One of the cool things about this brand is it offers so many different styles. And when you do a flight and you go through, we just went through 6 bourbons here. Everything's very different. Some of our competitors, when you go up the ladder with them, the profile isn't going to shift that much. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but I think with our product, it makes us unique that everything is so different. And that's cool. Different is fun.
I know when we were putting this together, you had mentioned that we were trying to get some of the LTOs that
Yeah,
I don't know if we weren't able to get some of them because they weren't out in time. Do you want to talk about those that we can look out for
sure.
on the market and
Absolutely, yeah.
kind of
So
things like that?
those literally, of course, that Ian, they like hit this week. So now they're out, right? So I couldn't get them to you, but technically the toasted rye you had is an LTO.
Okay.
Obviously that'll be back next year, but just want it wasn't like you guys got shorted at all. That's a it's a nice bottle. Our Valencia just came out, so the Valencia is our 4 grain. It's about a 5-year-old product or so. And that's finished for about a year in a Vino de Naranja cask. So that's an Spanish orange wine cask. So it's not the orange wines that you have in the United States where they're like from a grape, but they're just orange colored. This is actually a fortified wine made from Valencia oranges. So the flavor profile of that one, when I first tried it, I kind of think of the profiles when I sip something, I kind of get an image in my head, and those are kind of the notes that I collect and write down. I smelled it and I got this image, and then I drank it and I got this image. And so it's just an orange with a clove in it. That's the image I got. So it has like this very orangey Manhattan-y vibe, but then a nice spiciness to it that I don't get from any of the other 4 grain blends or 4 grain expressions. And I think part of the reason is because that Spanish fortified wine European oak cask gives it a nice spiciness. So it's just a really unique one. I'd say
I,
second to the Rio, that's probably the one that people kind of go the most nuts for.
Ian,
Um,
I
uh,
think the bottle of Valencia you sent me accidentally went to Jordan's house because he's drinking it from the bottle right there. You sent it to the wrong address.
oh, there it is. Oh, he got after it. Good for you.
It seems to happen a lot though.
Do you like that
Maybe
one, Jordan? I can tell you're enjoying it.
And it's a single barrel. So yeah,
Oh, it is. Oh, okay. All right. So,
yeah, it's a sealback single barrel Valencia
oh, is that from last year or that's from last year?
last year.
Okay, cool.
It's
I actually just purchased I'm also a degenerate Penelope collector, even though I work for the company. I just purchased Sealbox toasted rye version, their single barrel. So I
nice.
saw that and I was like, I'm fine. I don't care. I love it so much. Um, so the first time you tried the first one. So apparently people are really going nuts for this particular batch. Like Ian, who was it? Oh, Michael, you were saying, these batches are getting better, like with the rosé cask. Apparently people are really, really enjoying this latest Valencia that just came out. So again, more refined, getting better with the blends. The Tokai, again, you mentioned that one, Michael. That's one of my personal favorites. I really love rye. That's an 8-year-old. I have a feeling next year it's going to be older, so look out for that one next year. But that's finished for about, I think about 8 weeks in a Tokai cask, which is a Hungarian dessert wine. It's a very sweet white wine, kind of like a white port, um, or a Moscato or something like that, where it's just really, really sweet, powerful, flavorful dessert wine. And so that adds a nice, again, floral component, fruity component to that rye. And that's at about 106 proof. So it's going to be a little higher than the toasted rye and a little bit older. So that one to me is like a very cognac-y, Armagnac-y vibe, which I love. I love aged Armagnac and cognac. So for me, it's a really enjoyable experience. Um,
You guys are talking
we
about
will
the Tokai rye or the Tokai bourbon?
you have a Tokai bourbon? How did you get a Tokai bourbon?
It's a it's a single it is a single cask.
Okay, yeah. So
Sealed.
that one is a unicorn. And so I'll tell a fun story about that one. So when you order it's just drinking it from the barrel, from the bottle. I love it. So is that 114 proof or 116 proof? What is that?
117, 6 year.
117. Okay, yeah, that's a big boy.
I was
So
wondering why the bottles at Jordan's house always taste funny.
Just gotta lip it, man.
it kills all the germs. So those Tokai bourbons are really, really rare. And so when you order samples from the Kemper warehouse, so I ordered Tokai 8 to have just to pour at events and to have, for when I do things. And normally you just get whatever you ask for. If they have it in stock, they'll tell you, okay, we can only get you 2 of these, or you ordered 6, we can only give you 2 or whatever. So I ordered 3 or 4 Tokai 8-year-old ryes, and I got 2 of the Tokai rye, and then 2 of this other one, which is the one that Jordan had, although a different version slightly. And I was like, what is this? Why am I getting this? And I called Danny, and he essentially said, yeah, when we were acquired, we had all of these Tokai bourbons that we kind of just gave to MGP, and they didn't know what to do with them because there weren't that many of them. And they just will randomly send them when you order a Tokai rye. They'll just be like, well, I guess this is kind of the same thing. And they just send it to you. And they're fantastic. I mean, they're really, really good. I think they're only about a 5-year-old or so, but they're high proof and they're just big on the palate. They're really big. It's a 4-grain barrel proof, essentially with the Tokai finish, and they're fantastic. And so I got 2 of those bottles. I brought one to a tasting event I did with a group out of Arizona, and they just lost their minds on it. They loved it. And then I did one at a tasting at a wine event I did in Mendocino for a charity, and that was like people were just coming back and back. Like, I want to try that one. I want to try that one. I want to try that one. So that's a really interesting one, Jordan. It's funny that you had that because I didn't think anyone had it outside of Kemper, who's sending them by accident to reps when they're trying to ask for bottles. So it's cool that you had one. So that's a very special one. Sauterne cask. Okay, maybe we'll see that. So there's a bunch of other ones. So you mentioned Havana. So Havana is going to be our 4-grain as well, and that's finished, I believe, in maple casks with a Cuban rum finish. So I have a feeling that that one's going to be the next Rio. I think people are going to kind of lose their mind. It's a dual cask finish like the Rio. So the Rio is going to be your 4-grain. I think it's about a 5-year-old or so, in the high 90 proof range. And that one is aged mostly in honey casks and then amberana for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. You can't put it in amberana for too long or it overexposes the whiskey to that flavor. So the Rio is one of our most popular. I have a feeling Havana is going to also be very, very popular because it is a dual cask finish. It is 2 very unique casks. You have a Cuban rum cask and these maple casks. So it's going to have a very, very unique flavor, I'm sure of it. So that one should be coming out end of the year, early next year. The Valencia is out now. You're going to have more Rio coming out probably in the spring of next year, March or so. And there'll probably be more in the marketplace than we've had just because we're able to scale. Is that a Rio single barrel or just your normal Rio? Oh, okay. All right, Jordan. If you have a Rio single barrel, I'm gonna hang up right now. I can't. I would be like, come on, are you kidding me? I think they've only done one of those for a charity down in Florida. They did one, I think, with Mike Allstott. I don't know if
That
you
was
guys
just
saw the social media on that, but
total wine, $100.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think he has every barrel ever made.
I don't know. Wendy or Matt probably have everything that's ever made. Obviously, Danny and Mike probably do too, but I know that Wendy and Matt, have some of those crazy old school single barrels that the guys were doing because the guys didn't have to get anything approved. That if someone was like from a bourbon club, like, hey, can you make me a single barrel of this? Danny'd be like, yeah, sure. And so they just like put it on order and make it. So there's a lot of really cool older expressions from Penelope before they were acquired because they didn't really there weren't checks and balances necessarily. It was more just the guys were like, yeah, I think we can probably do that. Or I've been experimenting with something. We'll send it to this bourbon club that we have a really good relationship with. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. Jordan's just showing you the tip of the iceberg there. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there. So, and they're still doing it to some extent, right? There's some very unique single barrels. We have unique products come out. We have the Fuck Cancer that came out recently and shared pour. Is he going and finding an old bottle of that one, or is this the new one? Which one is that, Jordan?
Ah, this is Fuck Cancer, selected by Brian Atten.
Oh yeah, that might be the first one. I think that might be the first one.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, so Brian is one of our reps out of Ohio who's his wife passed away and they wanted to commemorate that, and so he kind of headed up creating the Fuck Cancer series. So we're on to bottle number 3 now. That just came out last week. And then we have our estate collections that are coming up, and those are a bunch of very, very unique older selections. So we have our private select, used to be the kind of flat black label. Now that's going to fall under, those are our 9-year-old. Those are going to fall under the estate collection. We have a single barrel as well that is going to fall under the estate collection. And then we have some really old, unique mash bills. So we have an MGP mash bill that's a 95.5 wheated whiskey that's going to come out that's 11 years old. Very, very rare. It's going to be lotted. So if you look at some of the social media that came out, they're offering the ability for you to actually go and pick up a bottle at Lux Row. We're having an event, and so you can purchase all of the lots for $1,000, and you get all the bottles, and you go and you pick it up in person, or you can purchase a bottle and go and actually get it towards the end of November. And so those are very, very limited amounts, but you should start seeing at least the private selects hitting your stores with the new labels, and those are really, really good. I've been fortunate enough to try some. The shared pour is already sold out. Oh, we need a Penelope barrel pick. Okay. So those are just some of the things we have coming out. And there's more coming out that's not even announced. Danny, and he's always innovating. So look out for some more really cool barrel finish stuff, some really unique barrels. We'll be seeing a lot of those products come out towards the middle end of next year. And these guys are just constantly innovating. The brand is doing really, really well. The other thing that is coming out, it's going to actually be part of our core products. It's going to be like a 95 proof wheated bourbon that's going to sit in between the 4-grain and the barrel strength. And that'll be a gold label. So you'll start to see that one come out probably towards the end of the year as well. And that one's going to be very approachable, not too pricey, and going to be just kind of a higher proof 4-grain with a little bit more wheat in it. So there's always a lot of products, a lot of stuff coming out. So
What's what you said, the Cuban cask? So
a Cuban rum cask is the Havana.
is it the Bacardi Cuban rum, or is it the real Havana rum?
Well, let's just put it this way. This is what I'll say, and this is being recorded. I don't want the Fed showing up to my house, but
I apologize for that internet outage on my end. Please
you so
continue.
much.
You were saying something about Cuban
Yeah,
rums.
no, nothing. I don't know what I was talking about.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's some of the products that we have coming out, and again, I just want to also just take this time to thank you for coming and tasting the bourbon and supporting our brand. I mean, I love this brand. I came at like I said, I was an obsessed hobbyist. So now I get to work with the Luxco brands, and Penelope's one of my favorites. So the chance to, talk to people about the brand, educate, reintroduce it to people, right? Obviously, you guys are OGs. You've been here for several years now, but to re-engage with the brand, kind of see what's going on. And then Vadim, I appreciate your kind of insight about how the brand is continuing to do great things, even though we've been acquired by our large company. It hasn't affected our ability to create great products, to be close with our fans and our consumers, and still continue to run the company the way that they were running it prior to acquisition. It hasn't changed much other than we just have a lot more resources and we can create more products and we can put more into the hands of folks like you. So there's more SKUs coming, there's more volume coming. Yeah, so some of our great LTOs, they'll be more available. So you guys can find them, put them on your shelf. Jordan, not too many more for you though. You've got enough. And
No, keep buying them, Jordan.
yeah.
We get to drink. The thing with Jordan though is every bottle he brings into the house gets cracked, so you can
Yeah,
come
well,
over
that's good. That
and taste
that I
everything.
love. It's like, hey, that means you're gonna have to buy another one after that one's done,
Yeah,
right? So
and
you
that's
don't
never a
just look at them,
problem.
you drink them.
Crack them all and share them. That's what they're
Yeah,
meant
I
for.
love it. That's awesome. Yeah.
That's
So
our
thank
ethos. Yeah, we don't do dragon hordes.
no, good.
We
But
share.
thank you all, and we appreciate it. And I look forward. Vadim and I are talking and trying to figure out another brand to do in Q1 or Q2 of next year. So we're looking at maybe Remus or Yellowstone or one of those. So we'll talk about those. Maybe even Rossville Union could be really cool because that's a rye focused, and some of those ryes are really really great. So we'll talk a little bit more, and maybe I'll be seeing you guys next year and do some more of these because Luxco has fantastic products, and some of the brands I just think need to shine more light on how great some of these products are.
Absolutely. Yeah, you beat me to it. I was gonna say that the best part is having you in your position where, we love Penelope, we enjoyed Yellowstone, but now having a direct contact that we can lean on to taste the rest of the Luxco
Exactly.
portfolio
Yeah. I
because
mean,
there's some great whiskey coming out of there that in the past have been they're kind of tight knit, so it's been harder to get a foothold to taste all those things. So I'm glad that we now know you. Hopefully you had a good time, and we look forward to having you back soon to taste through the whole portfolio and taste everything. I mean, we're all
absolutely.
about
Yeah. I
learning
mean,
and discovering new brands. So looking
yeah. I
forward to it.
mean, that's not even to mention our Lux Row brands, right? Our Blood Oath, our Rebel, our Ezra. These are fantastic products too, and that juice is getting older and older and getting better and better too. So that's a really, really great brand right now as well. So yeah, excited. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Until
Have a
next
good
time.
evening, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.